You cannot write well in English and you cannot speak English well unless you have a strong vocabulary. Building a vocabulary is hard. You cannot just build it as you go along. Obviously, when you speak, you don't have a dictionary available. And when you write, you can use a dictionary, but I strongly encourage you to already acquire the words that you need to use before you start writing. So when you're writing, all the words are in your head, and you just think as you write. Because remember the mantra, writing is thinking. And if you want to be able to think about great ideas, you need to have words that are helpful in building such ideas, in building arguments. You need to build your vocabulary. My name is Shai Lotan. I'm Associate Professor of International Public Law at the University of Copenhagen Faculty of Law. The purpose of this series of lectures is to help you improve your English. And in this particular lecture, we will study ways to build your vocabulary. I will start with speaking a little bit about why it's difficult to guide people into building vocabulary. Not everybody can use the same mechanism. There are some inherent difficulties in building a good vocabulary fast. Then I'm going to try to offer you the method that I consider to be the best to acquire a vocabulary fast and to build a strong vocabulary with many words that you can use as you write and speak. And at the end, I'm going to offer several other mechanisms that may not be ideal to build a vocabulary, but can still be useful and maybe a little bit less time consuming or a little bit easier for some of my listeners. Before we go to the recommendations on how you can build your vocabulary, here are 3 caveats that you should consider. These caveats are the main reason I focus most of my work on other techniques and not so much on teaching vocabulary. The first caveat is that there are great authors that use a very narrow vocabulary. If you look in fiction literature, Ernest Hemingway was very famous of that. He was very proud of that. He said, I use a very narrow set of words, and I do it deliberately because these are the words that are the clearest, the most easy to understand, the most powerful. But he also said something else. He said, I know the $100 words that are difficult to acquire, pronounce, remember, but I choose not to use them. And that's exactly something that is important. So even if you're going to use a narrow vocabulary, it's better that you know other words, because this will allow you to be able to read fluently the work of others, and there are many authors that use a very large vocabulary. And moreover, this will allow you to broaden your ability to think, because every word has a set of ideas that cannot be exactly translated to any other words. It was Steven Pinker who said, I think in one of the books that I read, that no word survived in the crucible of the English language unless it has a purpose. Which means that if there is a word out there that is difficult to pronounce, very long, very rare, almost obsolete, it's still possibly the best possible tool you can use to go from one idea to the other, to solve a problem in the language, to make an argument in the language. Now you may decide that you don't necessarily use that in your writing, still you can use it in your thinking. So building a strong vocabulary with many words, tens of thousands of words, is great. It will help you a lot to think, it will make you into a good speaker and to a good writer. But as you do that, you will read great authors that use a very narrow vocabulary, and this may be sometimes a bit confusing because you don't know which are the words that are in their head, which are the words that they recognize when they read, which are the words that they even use when they think before they write. So it's something that to be aware of. When you read many times, you get the feeling that you know almost all the words, where sometimes there's a lot of words out there in the background, in the thinking and the knowledge of the writers that are hidden. Now, the flip side of that, the flip side of good writers like Ernest Hemingway, writing and using a very narrow vocabulary, is a phenomena that I'm always concerned with when I see students that start to write. At the beginning, when you learn new words, you have an impulse to use them. It's natural, it happens to everybody. The problem is that then you may look pompous, you may look verbose, you may look like you're using words that are not ideal for the situation. Sometimes this word may not be the particular word that survived the English of the Crucible the crucible of the English language to be perfect. It may be just a highly sophisticated, rare word that is not directly fitting, that in fact is not a perfect match at all to what you want to say. And still you would have an incentive to use that just as in a way to practice or to show that all this learning is fruitful. Now, I wouldn't worry about it too much. When you are engaged in learning a lot of words, you may find that you're using an overly sophisticated vocabulary with no good reason. And this is something that will get better as you practice writing, especially if you're conscious about that. And you always think about the rules that you can learn all the way from the classic of Strunk and White: clarity, simplicity, what Zinser called removing clutter, taking everything that is not necessary, not trying to impress your authors, your readers. Try to be aware of that, and this will speed up the process of getting better. What I do require of you is, if you are using a word that is relatively rare, make sure that you use it properly. Make sure that you check in the dictionary and you check also the usage of a word. If a word is obsolete or out of use, sometimes dictionaries use this framing, try not to use it unless it's absolutely necessary, because it means that first of all, a lot of your readers will not understand it because it's not part of a language today. And second, it may not be accustomed to use it, and that you write it always to a community. And if this word is not a part of what the community views as legitimate, then you just try to avoid that. So the first problem is good writers sometimes write with a short vocabulary, a small vocabulary, and you don't know exactly how they choose their words. The second problem is beginners that are not good writers use an overly sophisticated vocabulary, and that's something that doesn't really serve the writing. The third problem is, and that's the last problem we discuss now, is that there are many different ways to build your vocabulary. Not everybody learns in exactly the same way. My father learns languages by reading dictionaries. I found it unbearable. As a child already I tried to do it, but just going from word to word, the words are not organized thematically, obviously, so it's just because of alphabetical order. I couldn't do that. I mean, it was very, very unpleasant for me to do, and that's why I never continued. My own way to study languages is also very unique, and I think most of my students would find it just as horrible. I read very old, occult, complicated texts, and I try to learn through that. So when I studied English, I read Shakespeare. I read most of Shakespeare's plays, at least the important ones. When I studied Danish, I read Kierkegaard, Enten Eller. So hundreds of pages of old, sophisticated, antiquated sometimes Danish. When I studied German, I read Goethe, I read Heine, I read Nietzsche. So very difficult texts. And when I was reading that, I only understood a very small percentage of the words. So for me, it was a benefit that I have a good memory. So I could, as I learned words, somehow the picture got more and more and more clear as a part of the process. But for most people, they will not enjoy that. If you read a page and you barely understand where a page is going, you will not do that continuously. So I don't recommend it as a method. I don't recommend my favorite method of learning dictionaries. What I try to do is think about a method that is good for almost everybody, maybe not everybody, but almost everybody, to learn vocabulary fast. This method, the method that works for almost everybody to acquire vocabulary fast, is to read a lot in text where you understand about 90% of the words. So you don't understand everything, because if you read a text with a very narrow vocabulary and you don't have any surprises, you will not learn new words. I also don't recommend texts where you don't really understand a significant amount of the words, as I did myself, because this is a very difficult method to persist and to get better. But if you know about 90% of the words, this means that on every page there are several words that you don't know. And these are the words that you should check in a dictionary. Now, I know that there's a trade-off here. By breaking the reading and checking in the dictionary, you will read more slowly. You also maybe enjoy less the reading because you constantly have your train of thought interrupted. But this is a way that allows you to study words very, very fast, because you constantly find new words in a context, then you check what they mean, and then you use this meaning that you acquire to understand the context, the broader context, and the sentence itself. And this is something that will allow you to learn very, very fast. Now, there are two main ways that I've implemented this technique. One way is to use a physical dictionary. I always like to have a one-volume dictionary, the thickest one I could find. And they are all very good, what I saw. So Oxford, Collins, Random House, probably the other by other companies, they are quite good. The nice thing about a one-volume dictionary is it's if it's the thickest one possible, you would get a good definition, but it will also be easy to find the words. If you are looking for a multi-volume dictionary, it takes more time. Sometimes it's 2 volumes or 3 volumes. You can still handle that maybe, but I think a one-volume dictionary is good. If you are checking the words in the dictionary, I advise you to do the following. You already spent quite a lot of time getting to the word, so read all the definition, all the usage, everything there is about this word. And don't be alarmed by the fact that some of your attention goes to words in the vicinity of this word. So usually in these dictionaries you would have the word that begins the page and the word that ends the page on every single page. That helps you to find the words easily. Sometimes I would check out the definitions of this word, even glance at them. Words next to your word you can also look at. Sometimes words that have the same etymology are also similarly spelled or spelled alphabetically one after the other. You can check a few words like this. So you already put the book aside, picked up the dictionary, and check the definition. This takes you at least a few seconds, if not more. So realize that part of your process is learning words and use it to your benefit, because you're already in using a dictionary, you're surrounded by words with word definitions. So glance a little bit on the page and try to learn these words. And this will pay off very, very quickly. Because if you do that, and if you read for, let's say, 2 hours a day, and check every word in the dictionary, you will learn hundreds of new words every month. And after several months, the difference in your vocabulary will be very, very substantial. The second method that I've used is if you're reading on a computer, or if you read and the computer is right next to you. You can check the word in a computer, in an internet dictionary, like dictionary.com or Merriam-Webster, that are my favorite, but I'm sure there are others that would be just as fine. Once you check the word in the dictionary, what I recommend for you to do is use the fact that you're on a computer. So open a Word file and write the word that you looked for, and write a definition of this word in your own words. It doesn't have to be long. It can be just three words, but it can also be a whole sentence. That's fine. Why do I recommend that? Because here, again, you have to remember, you already close the file that you're reading and open the computer, or close the book that you're reading and open the computer. So use the best tools that you can to remember the word. If you're going to write the word and write the definition with your own words, you're going to remember it much better. Plus, you are constructing a list of words that you can go and review once in a while, and this will improve your language significantly. When I started my PhD, my English already was quite good in terms of my vocabulary. I wasn't very good at writing, but my vocabulary was quite good. But I started to read law review papers, and law review papers have a lot of technical terms and even words that are just not technical terms, but commonly used in this jargon. So what I did was, every time I found such a word, I wrote it in a Word file. And after you write, let's say, 10, 20 pages, each page has 50 words, you get the type of language that is useful for law reviews, and you can use it later on, and you can understand it later on. So use the fact that you're working on a computer in order to make the list. So to conclude, the best way to build your vocabulary is to read a lot, and by a lot I mean 2-3 hours a day. It would be ideal. You can do even more, of course, if you can. And then check every word that you don't use in the dictionary. If it's a physical dictionary, use the fact that you have a physical dictionary next to you and glance at the other words to increase your vocabulary. If you're checking on the computer, write the word with a definition next to it in your own words, type it inside the computer and put it in a Word file, and then review this Word file once in a while, and this will be the vocabulary very, very fast. What if you cannot read for hours every day and check every word in the dictionary? If you either don't have the time or want to, or lack the discipline to follow this recommendation, there are some other ways you can still build the vocabulary. They are not maybe ideal, but they can work. Now, one way is you read a lot and you don't check words that you don't know in the dictionary. Now, if you do that, eventually you will understand a little bit about these words from the context. This will eventually stay in your head. You may be able to read much faster. You don't have to carry a dictionary around you. Is it ideal? No, not for the purpose of building your vocabulary. You may be able to read much more, and that's great for other things. You want to study sociology, you need to read sociological texts. If you want to become an author, checking language style is also beneficial. That's also something that you learn from reading. It's also enjoyable. All these things are great, but it's not ideal for your building your vocabulary. Over the years, I've devised many mechanisms that are kind of not the perfect way to build your vocabulary, but second best. So one way you can do that is at the end of the day, check 3 words that you remember in the dictionary. So make it as a commitment. You don't write these words, but you just read for an hour or 2, and then you try to remember. Wherever there are several words that I saw that were repeating themselves perhaps in a text, check these up. Or you can make a list as you're reading. Just note to yourself, for example, with a pen. Sometimes I would do that when I was going in the bus. I don't have a dictionary with me. I put the book aside for a second and I write on a page the words that I think I need to check later, and then I will check them later that evening. By the way, I do recommend that if you are using public transportation and you're not using an iPad where you can check words easily, you can have a smaller dictionary with you. It's not ideal, but I spent years using this compromise. I used a lot of public transportation. I didn't have an iPad. I bought a cheap, easy dictionary, and at a certain point you know already all these words, but as a beginner, there are words that are useful. So is it something that I recommend for my average listener who already knows English well enough to be interested in improving their work as a writer or as a speaker? Probably you're a bit too advanced for that, but maybe at the beginning, having a small dictionary with you at all times is also something that is useful. Now, beyond reading and checking the dictionary, either immediately or after a list or just 2 or 3 words that you remember, are there any other things that you can do? One thing you can do is you can try to look up word lists. So, for example, if you are interested in English vocabulary in law, you can go to Wiktionary and look for a list of words in this theme. I did it with my own students, and I prepare a list for them, and they can go and check many different words that are connected to law. That's always a possibility. So you can try to construct word lists for yourself. There are also all kinds of services that allow you to get word lists of different kinds. If you're looking for particularly rare words, Word of the Day in dictionary does that. If you're looking for words in a particular theme, you can make lists like this. What do you do with a list? There are many different ways. You can read the list and the definition close to each other and just try to remember it this way. In the old times, we used to make cards, physical cards, where you write the word on one side, the definition on the other, and when you go through these cards one after the other, you switch them, and every card that you don't know, you keep in a small pile, and this pile you check more thoroughly, again, until eventually you know all the words in the pile. So that's a technique that maybe is a bit old today. You can easily construct. There are also all kinds of apps. They change over time, but I've used quite a few of them in different languages that allow you to do something that is basically the same. So you create a list for yourself, and you check the words and you check the definitions much more easily than you would do if you would have a physical card in front of you. So word list, perfectly fine, and it's a method that you can use. Always remember that the chance you remember the word are a bit smaller because you don't see it inside the context. And even if you have a definition with usage, it's not the same as to read it as part of a book that you're reading anyway. Beyond that, there are all kinds of games that are designed specifically to build your vocabulary. With my own children, I like to play the Free Rice game that you can find just on the internet. It's designed to improve your vocabulary by making you find matches of words that are similar or different, and it's a lot of fun. It will probably teach you a few rare words, but it will not make really headway to improve your English. I think that all these other methods are fine, as well as listening and watching television. If you are afraid that you're missing some of the text in English, you can use subtitles. Maybe then you can see the way the word is spelled, and you can use that. That reading is really the key. Now, I want to say one last thing before we conclude. Reading is very important because you want to see the way the word is spelled, and this will help you to remember it. But remember that in your inner monologue, you're also pronouncing the word. Now, in the old days, what we used to do was to read in a dictionary that would have a specific designation for sounds. So you would read not the word, only the word itself, but there would be a series of signs and symbols that show to you how the word sounds. And I actually learned, every new dictionary, how to learn a new different system to do that. It's very time consuming, it's very difficult to do. One of the benefits of English dictionaries that are online or in the internet is you can do it just by clicking a button. You click the button and you hear the way the word sounds, and then you are going to, first of all, be able to pronounce it without making a mistake, which is great. And second, chances are you're going to remember it better because you will refer to this word correctly in your inner monologue and get used to thinking it through. Because remember, writing is thinking, and vocabulary is a great tool to enhance both.